I think we're going to get started. Give me a thumbs up if you can hear me. If you hear me? Yes, thank you, Bob. All right. Yes, I'm hoping, B'li Ayin Hara, that we're able to go uh, uninterrupted. If there is a siren, then at least here, I will let you know so that we'll see where we're at. We just take a break or we're done. So I may have to talk fast. Okay. I want to wish everybody, first of all, in case we get cut off, a Chag Kasher v'Sameach and a safe Chag. Remember safety first in all situations. And we know that Nisan is the month of miracles, as in the word Nes. And so we're hoping that at the very least, we can wrap up this whole campaign with a victory during the month of Nisan. We said that maybe it would be by Pesach. I don't want to really go till Shavuot, and um, we will say, of course, it's tefillah for the Chayalim, but more important than anything else, stay safe. It's even more important than eating matzah. But we're going to talk about that issue of matzah and chametz because it's very, very strange. It seems like we have declared war on Chametz. I want to try to understand what exactly is going on here. So, as always, we're going to begin with some very pertinent, pressing questions. And when we learn the Gemara, we always operate first and foremost from a sense of questioning exactly what's going on here. So, we know that um, the whole idea of chametz that we were in a hurry to leave Egypt. We did want to wait for the dough to rise. We talked about that before, and we said that in itself is strange because we had 2 weeks to prepare. But so the very process of making matzah includes the fact that you have to do it quickly. We have another. I think we had another share on that. Why speed is an important ingredient. But I want to talk about something else instead of focusing on the matzah, focusing on the chametz. And so I want to start with a couple of questions. First of all, why does this prohibition have to last a full week? Now, we know that the mitzvah of eating matzah, in terms of the commandment, is only on the first night or first night and day of Pesach. After that, you do not have to touch matzah. If you don't like the taste and you don't want to go near it, fine, don't. It's a 1 day requirement only. So why don't we have a 1 day requirement for chametz? Why don't we say, just like you have to eat matzah for 1 day, you have to refrain from having anything that is chametz for 1 day. Instead, that we make it a full week. It's number one question. Number two question, why does this begin on not on the holiday itself, but actually well before Pesach begins, actually around noon? Okay, it can be in the late morning, depends where you are and exactly what time, 10, 11 o'clock, whatever it may be. But what's going on here? Do we have any other holiday that works that way? Uh, for example, Sukkot. If you sit in a sukkah an hour before Sukkot, you have accomplished nothing except maybe get wet if it rains. There's no point to doing it. The Chag has not begun. Here too, the Chag will begin this year on Wednesday night, and yet we're going to start preparations even earlier, even on Tuesday, looking for that infernal chametz throughout our house. And then, of course, on Wednesday, we're going to be prohibited from eating it or owning it, and then we're going to have to burn it. But why is this all taking place prior to the Chag itself? It's very unusual and certainly an exception to the rule. And thirdly, um, we ran out of Egypt in great haste. We know that, but nevertheless, what is it tied so much to the chametz? So much so that the prohibition of eating chametz is more serious than almost any other prohibition. You first of all, you have to do everything possible to get rid of it. You got to sell it. You got to destroy it. You can't own it. And then if you violate that, so you're guilty of karet. That's a very, very serious punishment for something that seems that it shouldn't have to be so serious. So I want to try to offer some thoughts and use a bit of comment by a some beautiful words by Rav Yitzchak Meir Goodman, who talked about this as well. Well, since I'm a Chicagoan, let me begin with something about Chicago. Chicago has a lot of great museums: the Art Institute, the Spertus Museum of Judaica. But the best museum probably in Chicago is the Museum of Science and Industry. It's fantastic. And I always have great memories of it on Pesach. Yeah, thank you, Bob. Because Chol Hamoed, that's one of the main places that the Jewish community would go to. That and a Cubs game. If the Cubs are in town, let's go Cubs. Starting the season yesterday, um, and that was another whole story about going in large numbers to Cubs game. It was Rachmanis for the vendors because we couldn't buy any of their products. We took all our own products. They're looking at us like, "Hey, what's with you guys? You can't buy from us. You got to eat those crackers the whole time." Anyway, the Museum of Science and Industry is a fantastic place. In any case, they have an exhibition there ahead called Food, and this is dedicated as part of this exhibition on food to the history of bread. And one of the things they say about bread is that the ancient Egyptians were the first to discover modern bread baking techniques as we know them today. And it seems that the Egyptians were really into bread. They carried the art of bread to very high perfection, and they used for their bread not only wheat, but also spelt and barley, grains which the halacha tells us today also can produce the possibility of chametz, right? There are other things, rice, for example, or potato starch, that can never become chametz. But the Egyptians didn't use those. They didn't make potato bread. They made it out of those things that are chametz. And there seems to be a connection between bread and the Egyptians. Now, there's two references in Chumash specifically to bread and Egyptians. Okay, the first of them, which you may recall, both of these take place in the story of Yosef. First of all, Yosef becomes manager of the house of Potiphar, and the Torah tells us that Potiphar trusts Yosef with practically everything. Vayazov kol asher lo biad Yosef. V'lo yada tom umay. Yosef is in control of everything. Ki'im alechem asher rochel, except for the bread. He is not in charge of the bread, says the Ibn Ezra on commenting on this, that Yosef was prohibited from even touching the bread because Yosef was an Ivri. He was a Hebrew, and and therefore he might taint uh, coming from this other religion, he might taint the bread. Now, there's another reference to bread with Yosef. You may remember that. When his brothers come, he arranges a meal, and Egyptians are present there because, he's a potentate, and he sets up three separate tables for Yosef, for the Egyptians, and then for the brothers, and not for the brothers to mix. Vayisimu lo levado v'lahem libchem and Mitzrim haochlim oto. The Egyptians, when they go to eat, they eat separately. Kolo yuchlun hamitzrim lechol et hivrim lechem. They don't let the Jews eat bread or break bread with them. Kitoeva he lemitzrayim. It's an abomination for the Israelites, the Jews, for Yosef's family to eat bread with them. So you see, they're carrying this to a real extreme. There's something unique about bread that you don't break bread with these people that they may have regarded. We would regard the Egyptians, of course, as idolaters and a low class type of religion, but they feel that way about us. And the possibility here is that the Egyptians, who had all kinds of gods in all throughout the mineral, the animal world, that the Egyptians venerated, and it's quite possible that they also, in a sense, worshipped or venerated bread as a kind of spiritual power, making it even into an object of worship. So when we look at the bread in Egypt, we see it in a new light that um, we had spent over 200 years in Egypt. We fell to a low state, and God was taking us out of Egypt with amazing speed. So maybe uh he Hashem is saying there has to be something to commemorate this, and the commemoration of this exodus is perhaps the prohibition of not eating chametz, not only because that's exactly what happened when we left Egypt in the exodus, but because he was also eliminating a venerated Egyptian deity form of worship perhaps from our diet, and saying, no, you stay away from that for an entire unit of calendar time, a full week, not just a day, because you are going to make a break with the Egyptian and all their gods, including bread. And maybe the message is the Egyptians were proud of baking bread, of bringing that, because we know that bread is the staff of life. So that's for sure. But nevertheless, it didn't help you, Egyptians, to become an elevated nation. You enslaved an entire people, even though Yosef was the one who really saved you. And therefore, we can live without this great discovery of yours of bread making as long as we want to. And we're going to prove it by staying away from it for an entire week. To say that if this is something that really you have made into a form of idol worship, then as we begin our journey to Israel following God, we're going to abstain from it for a full week. And that is exactly why, you may not know this, although the Torah talks about bread a lot in terms of offerings, essentially bread is not brought on the Mizbeach. The bread that the Torah is talking about when it says lechem is actually matzah, unleavened bread. It is not the kind of bread that we go to the bakery and buy before Shabbos, the chalot. Which so I'll say a word about that in a moment. And this idea to come back for I'll come back to that in a moment. But this idea of why we start early. So the rabbi here explains, it's interesting that the 24-hour day divides into units, 4 units of 6 hours each. Different societies, different cultures, they chose when to begin their day. Some societies consider dawn as the beginning of the day. Others count midnight as the beginning of a new day. We consider the arrival of night as the new day. And then there are yet others who consult the heavenly signs, and they use this as a kind of compliment or emphasis on one of their gods, and that's the Egyptians, because they worship the sun god, and they consider the sun in the center of the sky as their new day. So we understand perhaps now why, if chametz is linked to the Egyptian form of worship, so the Torah begins it with the start of the Egyptian day in which we left their land, which was right, let's say, around noon of Erev Pesach, and that's when we begin to forbid the use of chametz. We are making a break, as if historically that's when there's a whole question about when we really left Egypt. But in any case, when their day started, we were already saying we cannot have any chametz, any bread at that point, as a kind of shtach, a kind of looking down at this Egyptian form of worship. It says in the pasuk, we're told to eat matzah from the beginning of Pesach until the 21st day of Nisan ba'erev, in the night. So obviously it would be in the night. We know that. So one of the commentators says, since the prohibition of chametz begins with the Egyptian calendar, the Torah is reminding us that by the end of Pesach, we're not going by their calendar anymore. We're going by the Erev, by the night. That's when we start. Um, the Rambam talks a lot about prohibitions of the Torah that are based on practices from other cultures, including Egypt. And one of them clear concentrates sometimes on the Egyptian priests and things they did that we're not allowed to do, and therefore we we can say that yes, we would want to abstain to some extent from falling into an Egyptian form of worship. But Hashem is saying to us that I'm not going to take it away forever, because there are other things that cultures may believe in, but if it's good for us, and if it's not specifically a form of idolatry, then we would be allowed to do it. But Hashem draws the line and says, okay, you can have bread, just like after the Beit HaMikdash was destroyed, there was a thought to ban meat. They say, no, you can have meat, but, and you can have festive occasions within limits. When, Hashem said after Noah, you could have meat, which originally was banned. Adam could not eat meat, but with certain conditions, right? It has to be shechted properly, and all the different laws that apply to eating meat. But Hashem says, I'm going to draw the line just to show at some point that there is an element here that is a negative. And therefore, he says, um, you're not going to have bread on my mizbeach except for two occasions. One of those is the carbon toda. We're told that the thanks offering, imal toda yakrivenu alechem al chalot lechem chametz yakriv karbano. There you can use chametz for it, and that perhaps is a form of saying on why in the carbon toda, the thanks offering, we're giving thanks to Hashem that we have the opportunity to eat chametz as well. 98% of our offerings no, but Hashem is saying to us, I'm not going to ban chametz entirely. When it reaches a high spiritual level, generally you don't use it. You don't bring it with the offering. You bring matzah, but to show that it's permissible, you do have offerings that include it. So one of them is carbon toda. The other one is shtei halechem, the two bread, the loaves of bread that were brought on Shavuot. And those had to be the kind of bread we know as challah. And the connection here may be because, Shavuot is the culmination of 50 days from the beginning of Pesach. And there we are elevating ourselves to a new level. Hopefully, we are overcoming the 50 levels of impurity that were epitomized by the Egyptians step by step. But on that 50th day, when maybe we have reached a higher state of purity, we can bring that offering with the chametz, with the real bread, in order to indicate, okay, now we are not susceptible anymore to the Egyptian idolatry. We've overcome that through the step-by-step process of purification, and now we can kind of celebrate that by having bread in this carbon offering of Shavuot, and bring it, of course, into the Beit HaMikdash. So I think we've tried to answer these questions. It's a beautiful idea that chametz, nothing intrinsically wrong with it, but it was so tied to the Egyptian culture that we needed to really have a significant break. One day would not have done it. And therefore, Hashem said, no, you have to have a whole week. Your dietary schedule is altered because you are a new people living a new kind of life, and that specifically includes food. I want to close, and I don't normally do this, but um, one of our sons who is stuck in Buenos Aires. He'll hear this if he's not on. He'll hear the recording, and he can't get back for Pesach. So he sent me, I think, a beautiful idea that I want to share with you. That you can share at your Seder table as well, as he prepared something to say there in Argentina. And the title of this is "Why Does the Story of Pesach Matter?" And he says one of the deeper ideas behind Pesach is not just journeying from slavery to freedom, but the reality of what it means to exist as a people without independence. Because in ancient Egypt, the Israelites were not just enslaved, they were a minority community living within a much larger and powerful civilization. They had no sovereignty, no ability to protect themselves, no control of their future, and their fate was determined by the will of others. And this is not unique to the story of Pesach. For most of human history, smaller nations, tribes, and communities that live within larger empires face similar outcomes. Many were conquered, many were erased, or many assimilated beyond recognitions and disappeared without any trace whatsoever. We don't even know the names of most of them because history is usually written by those who survive. What makes the Jewish story remarkable is not just the Exodus, but what comes after the Exodus. Because despite repeated cycles of exile, persecution, and displacement, the Jewish people endured. From the destruction of the Beit HaMikdash and the exile that followed to the Inquisition and the Holocaust, Jewish existence often meant living as a minority among nations that were much more powerful and being vulnerable and sometimes tragically unprotected. But somehow the story continues. And he says this raises a powerful idea. Survival is not something to take for granted. It's something that historically requires resilience and the ability to be independent. The exodus from Egypt did not end when we left. It continued because we formed a people, a set of values, and eventually found a homeland. That stage, having a land, a society, and the ability for us to shape our own future, not have it imposed on us, was not incidental. It was essential to our survival. In modern times, this idea takes on renewed significance. After thousands of years without sovereignty, Am Yisrael returned to having a homeland in 1948. This is more than a political reality. It represents the ability for a people who were dependent for so long on the goodwill of others to now take responsibility for our own safety, our own future. And today, as we sit here on Pesach, these ideas are not theoretical. They play out in real time. This conflict involving Israel and Iran that we are currently in are not just geopolitical, they're part of a much longer story about survival, security, and the right of a people to exist and defend itself. And it's not only about governments or armies, it's also about people. For those of us who live in Israel, being here is not just a location, it's a choice, it's a commitment. Building a life, raising children, contributing to society, these are all part of what it means to ensure a future for us that is stable, independent, and thriving, and not under the dominion of anyone else. There are different ways people contribute to that story. Some are physically present, building and protecting. Others are working globally for our continuation. Everybody contributing in some way. The world today is complex, perspectives differ, but one thing history shows us is that communities without the ability to protect themselves face immense challenges to their continued survival. So when we tell the story of leaving Egypt, it's not only about freedom from oppression, it's about what comes next. How do we ensure our future? How do we protect our identity? What responsibility do we have now that we're independent? And how can we, each one of us, contribute to that story? Freedom is not just about leaving a place of hardship, it's about creating a new reality where that hardship cannot repeat itself. And the responsibility to build, protect, and sustain that reality is part of the story that continues long after we finish the Afikomen, the Seder, and the Pesach story of Exodus ends. So I think it was a beautiful commentary on kind of a perspective on history that we focus on the Exodus, but we have to also focus on what comes next to be able to build and sustain ourselves as an independent nation. So to Yedidia, thank you for offering that, and I hope it's a message for everybody. So I'm going to close with a tefillah for our Chayalim, wishing everybody a a wonderful Pesach wherever you may be, and stay safe and follow the rules. Mishaber Chavateinu Abraham Yitzchak Yaakov Yivarech et Chaylei Tzva Haganah Yisrael Hamdim Al Mishmar Tzenu Varei Eloheinu Migvul HaLevanon V'ad Bimar Mitzrayim Min Hayam HaGadol Ad Lavo Arava B'Yabasha Ba'Avir Vayamiteinu Adonai Tavenu Kamim Aleinu Nigafim Lifnehem HaKadosh Baruch Hu Yishmor V'Yatzil Et Chayleinu Mikol Tzara V'Tzukah Mikol Negel Machalav Yishlach Bracha V'Atzlacha B'Chol Masei Dehem Yadber Soneinu Taktehem V'Yatrein B'Kesed Yeshua V'Ter Nitzachon B'Kuyam V'Hem HaKatuv K'Adonai Elohechem Olechem Lachem Lilachem Lachem Imoivechem Lo Shi'etchem V'Nomar Amen. It's a good opportunity to thank Yossi, our host, who's always with us and very, very exact about getting it right. I also want to mention in an hour and a half, I'll be joining with another rabbi on a Q&A on Pesach questions, taking questions on all kinds of things dealing with the halacha, the hashkafa, etc. So anybody who wants to join in that, if you did not receive the link, you can send me a WhatsApp or an email, and I'll send you the link for that. That it's at 8 o'clock Israel time. Don't forget, we are changing our clocks tonight, and we are moving into summertime. So we will be going from 2 a.m. to 3 a.m. And as we said many times before, technically you have to stay up till 2 a.m. to change to 3 a.m. But no, of course you don't. And let's hope there isn't a siren that forces us to be up at 2 o'clock or waiting to change the clock. So remember that before you go to bed. And so, you won't mess up your day tomorrow, and you'll be on time for everything. In any case, we hope to come through Pesach successfully and meet again. As I think I mentioned at the beginning, we're going to meet again on the 16th of April because we have Pesach on Thursday, then Isru Chag. Maybe not be able to make it, so definitely Bli Ayin Hara for the Bezrat Hashem on the 16th of April. Everybody have a fantastic, wonderful Shabbat Hagadol, and also, of course, a great Pesach. And it's been a pleasure being with you throughout this year. And we have started a new year in Nisan. As you know, Nisan is the first month. So Hashem should allow us to continue Michael, El Chayil, and many more times sharing these thoughts and shiurim together. Shabbat Shalom, B'sorot Tovot, Yeshuot, V'nechamot.